The richest man in the city didn't fear rivals, scandals, or the SEC, but he did fear one thing: sweetness. The kind that sticks to your fingers and won't let go. Unfortunately for him, the quiet maid who scrubbed his sinks like she was worshiping an altar carried more honey in her hips, lips, and soft little sighs than his whole empire. And the first time she brushed past it without a single glance, he didn't just notice her. He felt the entire hive inside him wake up hungry. Callan Wentworth didn't throw parties. He hosted calculated performances. Tonight's charity gala at his Bel Air estate wasn't about generosity. It was about reminding Silicon Valley, Wall Street, and everyone in between that at 34, he owned more than companies. He owned rooms, conversations, the very air people breathed when he entered. 200 guests glittered under crystal chandeliers worth more than most mortgages. Women in dresses that cost 5 figures. Men in watches that cost 6. Callan moved through them in a charcoal Tom Ford suit, his jaw sharp enough to cut contracts, his eyes the color of expensive whiskey, and just as cold. He shook hands. He smiled on cue. He felt absolutely nothing. But in the margins of all that shine, someone else was working. Kira McKellar was 26 years old and had mastered the art of existing without being seen. She cleared champagne flutes from marble tables. She refilled water glasses before anyone noticed they were empty. She wore a simple black dress with long sleeves that fell past her wrists, a hemline that kissed her ankles, and her honey blonde hair pulled into a tight, apologetic bun. She didn't make eye contact. She didn't linger. She certainly didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then, barely. While a tech mogul's wife laughed too loudly near the grand piano, Kira slipped past carrying a tray of empty glasses, her movements fluid and practiced. A man in a Rolex bumped into her. She apologized. He didn't. Callan noticed that. He noticed a lot of things he shouldn't have. Like how she was the only staff member who never looked at him. Not once. Not even accidentally. By midnight, the guests had gone. The catering team packed up. The house fell into that particular silence that only money can buy. The kind where even your breathing feels expensive. Callan stood in his study, loosening his tie, staring at absolutely nothing. And that's when he heard it. Humming. Soft. Pure. Unguarded. He followed the sound down the hall, past rooms he never used, to the industrial kitchen where staff ate their meals. Through the crack in the door, he saw her. Kira was alone, wiping down counters, humming something he didn't recognize. Her movements were gentle, almost reverent, as if the steel countertop deserved kindness. Callan had been pursued by supermodels, propositioned by heiresses, seduced by women who knew exactly what they wanted and how to get it. But this shy, hidden thing humming to herself in his kitchen at midnight, she scared him a little. Because in a house full of people trying to be seen, the only honest soul was the one doing everything to disappear. Over the next 2 weeks, Callan Wentworth did something he hadn't done since building his first startup in his Harvard dorm room. He changed his routine for someone else. He started taking morning coffee in the smaller breakfast nook instead of his office. Kira cleaned there at 7:30. He began walking the long way to the gym. She vacuumed that hallway at 8:15. He pretended to need files from storage rooms she happened to be organizing. She noticed none of it, or if she did, she gave no sign. One morning, he found her in the staff pantry, rearranging canned goods so the older housekeeper, Elspeth Kershaw, wouldn't have to reach the high shelves. "You're reorganizing my pantry," Callan said from the doorway, startling her. Kira spun around, eyes wide. A can of tomatoes clutched to her chest like a shield. "I'm sorry, Mr. Wentworth. I should have asked. I didn't say stop." He leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, studying her like she was a puzzle he'd paid a fortune to solve. "You do that a lot." "Do what, sir?" apologized for being thoughtful. She flushed, dropping her gaze to the floor. It's not my place to rearrange. Kira. Her name felt strange in his mouth, too soft for the hard edges of his life. You work like you're hiding from someone. Are you? Her hands tightened around the can. For a moment, he thought she might answer. Then she set it down carefully, murmured something about needing to check the laundry, and disappeared before he could stop her. He stared at the empty doorway, frustrated in a way that had nothing to do with business. Later that week, he asked Elspeth about her. Kira? Lovely girl. Quiet. Never complains. Elspeth folded napkins with the efficiency of someone who'd worked in wealthy homes for 40 years. Sends most of her paycheck back to her family in Brisbane. Works doubles when we're short-staffed. Keeps to herself. Why? Elspeth gave him a look. Some people just prefer the background, Mr. Wentworth. Not everyone wants the spotlight. But Callan had spent his entire life reading people. Their tells, their weaknesses, their desires. And Kira McKellar wasn't someone who preferred the background. She was someone who was terrified of the foreground. He noticed other things, too. Small things that didn't add up. It was 78 degrees in Los Angeles. Every other staff member wore short sleeves. Kira wore long sleeves and buttoned them at the wrists. When she bent to pick up something she dropped, she moved carefully, always making sure her skirt stayed in place, never exposing even an inch of skin above her ankles. And she never, ever touched anyone, not even accidentally. One afternoon, he found her in the library, dusting shelves of books he'd never read. Sunlight streamed through the windows, turning her hair to spun gold. "Do you read?" he asked. She jumped, nearly dropping the feather duster. "Mr. Wentworth, I didn't hear you come in." "That's because you were humming again." He moved closer, hands in his pockets, keeping his distance. "You do that when you think no one's listening." "I'm sorry." "Stop apologizing, Kira. It's exhausting." He picked up a book from a nearest shelf. Something about ancient Rome he bought to impress someone he couldn't remember. "Do you like to read?" She hesitated. "Yes, sir." "What do you read?" "Romance, mostly." The words came out barely above a whisper. "The kind where people get happy endings." "Do you believe in those?" "Happy endings." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for just a second he saw something raw in her green eyes. Something that looked like longing wrapped in resignation. "I think some people get them," she said quietly. "Just not people like me." Before he could ask what she meant, she was gone again, leaving him alone with a book about Rome and the uncomfortable realization that he was developing feelings for someone who wouldn't even stand in the same room with him for more than 30 seconds. Callan Wentworth had conquered markets, destroyed competitors, and built an empire before he turned 30. But the shy maid who cleaned his house? She was the first thing he couldn't figure out how to win. Kira McKellar had learned to live with ghosts. The worst one visited her in the laundry room on a Wednesday afternoon while she folded Callan's shirts. Egyptian cotton, custom made, smelling faintly of cedar and that expensive cologne he wore. Her hands moved automatically, creasing sleeves, smoothing collars. And then she was 2 years old again. The memory came fast and vicious. Her mother's cramped kitchen in Sydney. Linoleum floors. A pot of cooking oil heating on the stove, too close to the edge. Tiny Kira, barely tall enough to see the counter, reaching for something. A toy, a sippy cup. She couldn't remember any more. Her hand caught the pot handle. The oil fell, screaming. Hers. Her mother's. The neighbor who called the ambulance. Royal Children's Hospital. Surgery. Skin grafts taken from her small arms to repair the damage to her inner thighs where the oil had burned deepest. The scars never faded. Thick, textured lines across both her arms where they'd harvested the skin. irregular patches on her inner thighs that looked like someone had tried to piece her back together with the wrong materials. Growing up, boys had been cruel. You look like Frankenstein's girlfriend. Did someone try to build you from spare parts? By the time she turned 16, Kira had learned to hide. Long sleeves, long skirts, long silences. By 26, she perfected invisibility. She folded the last shirt and pressed her palm against her eyes, willing the memory away. Upstairs, Callan was asking questions. How long has she worked here? He asked his head of household, Tavish Dunford, a stern man in his 50s who ran the estate like a military operation. About 8 months, sir. Is she happy with her pay? She's never complained. Does she have friends among the staff? Tavish gave him a curious look. She's friendly enough. Polite, but she doesn't socialize much. Eats lunch alone. Leaves straight after a shift. He paused. May I ask why you're asking, Mr. Wentworth? Callan turned toward the window, overlooking his manicured gardens. Just making sure my staff is taken care of. Of course, sir. But that wasn't it at all. The truth was simpler and far more dangerous. Everyone wanted Callan's attention. Models sent him unsolicited photos. Entrepreneurs pitched him in elevators. Women touched his arm at galas and leaned in close enough for him to smell their perfume. Kira McKellar was the only person in his life who acted like he didn't exist. It was driving him absolutely insane. 3 days later, Callan stayed late at the office dealing with a hostile takeover attempt that would have stressed most men into early graves. By the time he got home at 11 p.m., he was exhausted, hungry, and in desperate need of something that didn't involve lawyers or spreadsheets. He headed toward the rarely used West Wing kitchen, the one the staff used for late-night prep, and found Kira there, mopping floors. She was humming again, that same melody he'd heard weeks ago. He stood in the doorway, watching her move in that careful, deliberate way she had, and felt something in his chest loosen. You're here late, he said. She startled so badly, she nearly dropped the mop. Her foot slipped on the wet floor. Callan moved without thinking, crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and caught her, one arm around her waist, the other gripping her forearm to steady her. For a split second, they were impossibly close. Her body pressed against his. Her hair smelled like vanilla and something floral he couldn't name. Her eyes were enormous, green as summer leaves, staring up at him in complete shock. His hand had pushed up her sleeve slightly. He saw the scar on her arm, long, textured, unmistakable. At the same moment, her skirt had shifted just enough to reveal the edge of another scar on her upper thigh. Kira's entire body went rigid. She shoved away from him so hard she nearly fell again. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean... Kira, I'll clean this up right away. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have been in your way. You weren't in my way. He kept his voice gentle, hands raised in surrender. You slipped? I caught you. That's all. But her face had gone pale. She was breathing too fast, eyes darting around like a trapped animal looking for an exit. You don't have to apologize for staying upright, he said quietly. She didn't respond, just grabbed the mop, mumbled something incoherent, and fled. Callan stood alone in the kitchen, his heart pounding for reasons that had nothing to do with the near fall. He'd seen her scar, just a glimpse, but enough. And instead of disgust or pity or any of the reactions she clearly expected, he'd felt tenderness. Upstairs in her small staff quarters, Kira sat on her bed, shaking. He saw and now he knows. He'll fire me. Or worse, he'll pity me. And pity is unbearable. She pulled her sleeves down as far as they would go and wrapped her arms around herself. She'd worked so hard to stay invisible, to be perfect, to give him no reason to notice her flaws. And in 10 seconds, it had all fallen apart. Meanwhile, Callan lay in his king-size bed in his master suite, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment over and over, the weight of her body against his, the fear in her eyes, the scars she tried so hard to hide. He'd held supermodels, heiresses, women who decorated themselves like expensive art. But Kira McKellar, with her secrets and her scars and her stubborn refusal to be seen, she felt real in a way nothing else in his life did. And that terrified him almost as much as it fascinated him. For 3 days, Kira avoided Callan entirely. She switched shifts. She cleaned rooms after he'd left them. When he entered a space, she found a reason to exit. It was driving him mad. On the 4th day, he'd had enough. He found Tavish and gave him a direct order. I need Kira to organize my private study. Today, no one else. Tavish raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to question his employer. Yes, sir. That afternoon, Kira arrived at his study with cleaning supplies and a look of barely concealed dread. Callan was waiting, leaning against his desk, tie loosened, sleeves rolled up. You've been avoiding me, he said without preamble. I've been working, Mr. Wentworth. Kira, her name again, soft and firm. Look at me. She did, reluctantly, her hands twisting together. I need to know something, he said. Are you afraid I'm going to fire you? I don't know. I'm not. She exhaled shakily. Okay. Are you afraid I'm going to hurt you? No. You're not. You wouldn't. Then why won't you let me near you? The question hung in the air between them. Kira stood frozen, every instinct screaming at her to run. But something in his eyes, something genuine and patient and achingly kind, made her stay. Because, she whispered, you don't know what you're asking for. Then tell me. I can't. Why? Because once you know, you'll look at me differently. Everyone always does. Callan pushed off the desk and moved closer, slowly, carefully, like approaching something wild. Try me. And maybe it was exhaustion, or loneliness, or the way he looked at her like she mattered. But Kira started talking. She told him about the accident, the hot oil, the surgeries, the skin graft that left her arms and thighs covered in scars. She told him about the boys in school, the whispers, the humiliation. She told him about staying single, about choosing work where she could hide, about sending money home to her family who loved her but didn't understand why she was so ashamed. And then, voice breaking, she told him about last year, about the man she'd met online, an American she'd never met in person, how they'd talked for months, how she'd felt safe because he was across an ocean and she could control what he saw, how she'd finally trusted him enough to turn on her camera during late-night calls, how he'd recorded everything without her knowing, how he'd threatened to send the videos to her family, her employer, everyone unless she paid him. I gave him everything I had, she whispered, tears sliding down her cheeks. And it still wasn't enough. He posted them anyway. On some site I'd never heard of. My body, my scars, everything I hate about myself, just out there for anyone to see and laugh at. Her voice cracked. So when you say you want me, when you look at me like I'm something worth having, I know you mean it now. But the moment you saw all of me, really saw me, you would regret it. Everyone does. Silence filled the study. Kira waited for pity, for awkward comfort, for him to realize he'd made a mistake. Instead, Callan turned his back to her. Without a word, he pulled his shirt over his head and let it fall to the floor. His back was a map of violence. Long, jagged scars ran from his shoulder blade to his hip, the kind left by blades, not accidents. A deep, angry slash curve around his ribs. Smaller marks dotted his shoulders. Business rivals, he said quietly, still facing away. 5 years ago. They wanted me to sell my company. I refused. They sent men with machetes to convince me. His voice was steady, but she heard the old pain beneath it. I spent 3 weeks in the hospital, another 2 months in physical therapy. He turned to face her, his chest bare, vulnerability written across every scar. I have never shown these to anyone I've dated, he said, because men like me aren't allowed to look weak. We're supposed to be untouchable, perfect. His golden brown eyes found hers. But I'm not perfect, Kira. I'm scarred and broken, and I have nightmares about things I'll never tell anyone. He took a step closer. So if my scars don't make me less of a man, why do you believe yours make you less of a woman? Something inside Kira shattered. She spent 24 years believing she was damaged goods, that her scars made her unlovable, that she needed to hide to be worth anything. But Callan Wentworth, billionaire, untouchable, perfect, stood before her with his own broken places on display, looking at her like she was the bravest person he'd ever met. I'm scared, she whispered. I know. I don't know how to do this. Neither do I. What if you change your mind? He closed the distance between them, gentle as a prayer. His hand rose slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear. Kira McKellar, he said softly, I have been chasing you for weeks. I have rearranged my entire routine just to be in the same room as you for 30 seconds. I cannot stop thinking about the way you hum when you think no one's listening, or how you reorganize pantries for elderly housekeepers, or the fact that you're the only honest thing in my entire manufactured life. His forehead touched hers. So no, he whispered, I'm not going to change my mind. But you have to choose this. Not because I'm your employer. Not because you're afraid. But because you want to. Kira's hand shook as she reached up and touched the scarred back. He exhaled like she'd given him air for the first time in years. I want to, she whispered. Are you sure? I'm terrified. But yes. And when he kissed her, soft and careful and achingly tender, Kira McKellar finally understood what it felt like to be seen and chosen anyway. 3 months later, the scandal broke exactly how scandals always do. Badly. Billionaire Callan Wentworth dating his maid. Explicit photos leaked online. The gossip sites had a field day. Someone had found Kira's old videos from a blackmailer, paired them with photos of her leaving Callan's estate, spun a story about predatory billionaires and innocent staff. Callan's PR team called an emergency meeting. His lawyers advised immediate separation. His board of directors suggested a cash settlement and an NDA. Callan told them all to go to hell. Instead, he released a statement that made every news outlet from Forbes to TMZ lose their minds. Kira McKellar is not a scandal. She is the best decision I have ever made. The photos circulating online were obtained through criminal blackmail, and anyone who shares them will be hearing from my legal team. As for our relationship, it's real, it's serious, and it's none of your business. She was never just the help. She was always the only person brave enough to be real with me. The internet exploded. Half called him a hero, half called him delusional. Kira, hiding in his penthouse, called him insane. You just tanked your reputation for me, she said, staring at him in disbelief. My reputation was built on ruthlessness. He pulled her into his arms. Let them think I've gone soft. I don't care. Your board will care. They'll get over it. He kissed her forehead. Or I'll buy them out. I'm good at hostile takeovers. She laughed despite herself. You're ridiculous. I'm in love with you. Same thing. 6 months after that, Kira was enrolled part-time at UCLA studying hospitality management. Not because Callan pushed her, but because he'd asked what she wanted to do, if she could do anything, and she'd finally let herself dream. The staff at the estate knew. Elspeth had smiled knowingly and said, "About time." Tavish had simply nodded and adjusted the household schedule to accommodate her new class times. One evening, Callan found her in the kitchen where he'd first heard her humming. She was making tea, wearing one of his shirts and shorts that showed her scars without shame. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her, feeling something he'd never expected to feel in his cold, calculated life. "Peace. You're staring," she said without turning around. "You're humming." "I do that now." "You've heard." He crossed to her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Do you remember what you said to me that first night I tried to kiss you? That you didn't know what you were asking for?" "Yeah." He turned her gently to face him. "Do you still believe that?" Kira looked up at the man who'd seen her worst parts and chosen her anyway. The man who'd stood by her when the world tried to tear her down. The man who'd taught her that scars were just proof you'd survived something worth surviving. "No," she said softly. "I think you knew exactly what you were asking for. You just had to wait for me to believe I was worth it." He smiled, that rare, genuine smile he saved only for her. "You were never just a help, you know." "I know. You were the only sweetness in this whole hive." She laughed and pressed her palm against his scarred back. "Scars and all. Especially the scars." She kissed him then, soft and sure, tasting like honey and second chances. "We're stuck with each other now," she whispered against his lips. "Good," he whispered back. "I was afraid you'd try to run again." "Where would I go? You rearranged your whole life for me. Best investment I ever made." And in that kitchen where she'd once hummed alone, believing she'd never be seen, Kira McKellar finally understood what it meant to be home. She was just a help until the billionaire tasted her sweetness and realized it was the only thing in his world that couldn't be bought, only trusted. If this story touched your heart, made you believe in second chances, or reminded you that your scars don't define your worth, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Tell me, what would you do if someone saw your deepest insecurity and chose you anyway? Let's talk about it. See you in the next story.